Hey, what's up guys, Terminator292 here of Retribution Gaming, and in this video I want to discuss Kyros. In particular the balance of Kyros right now. To start off with, Kyros for me was a big selling point on this game, and especially with Epitaph. Like, you can go back to, I think, like episode 0 of the podcast, which was the introduction one, and immediately it was Kyros this, Wingrave that. But the bulk of it was just generally Kyros at that point in time. Now, when the game first came out, yes, he was overpowered, and yes, he did deserve to be nerfed or fixed, however you call it. Kyros right now is not in a good spot, to be fair. And by that I mean he's very fun to take into expeditions, clear some trash mobs and stuff, and use at lower level bosses. But at end game, or like the version of end game that we have right now, anything with a resilience bar, he kind of struggles against, really. And all you've got is rake spam. And that's about it, really. That's Kyros in a nutshell right now. It is rake spam. After discussing it with many people, either on podcasts, off podcast, and in Discord channels, either that be in our own one or on the Wayfinder Discord, I'm at the conclusion that his kit could do a bit of a work here. It needs a little touch up to really bring him into line more with where other Wayfinders are currently. Now, in general, Arcanists could actually do a touch up in saying that. But out of all the Wayfinders in the game, this guy needs touching up the most right now. And that's just not my conclusion either. That's a lot of people's conclusions that I've spoken to. And I've spoken to many people about this, and they've heard me rant about this quite a lot. On top of that, there was a lot of people in the Wayfinder Discord, in that Kyros chat, saying very similar things to me as well. Like, he does need to be touched up here. First, let's go on the Arcane Focus, because this is one of his abilities which is kind of lackluster. I feel like his rank 2 on this ability should just be defaulted anyway. Like, this shouldn't be an upgrade, this should be a standard to the ability of how it works. And instead of where it is now, a little more competitive pick would be great to go here, because at the moment no one's really speccing into this too much. At the moment, I just don't feel like I would ever invest into this ability outside of like putting 1 point into it. I'm not ever going to fully invest into it because it just doesn't stand up to where Rake and Siphon are. The idea I had for this ability in general though was you would move his rank 3 into the rank 2 position, and for a new third you would have it so enemies hit under the skill would then reduce your cooldowns. And already, with that small effect, it's become a lot more of a competitive pick. You've now got to decide, do I want Siphon to give me more damage up front, or do I want to play out the long fight here and have my cooldowns recharge quicker for that long fight so I can keep the flow of rotation going. The other idea I did have for this as well would be that you would cast this mark just before your ult to basically boost your ult. It'd be like a combo field of sorts. So you would lay down this field, ult into it, and you would gain bonus damage via that method as well. Okay, so let's talk about Hand of Reckoning very quickly. This is the skill I take issue with the most because its damage is really good on mobs with no resilience at all. But mobs with resilience, it is kind of a dud. I'm better off just spamming Rake, to be fair. So what I would do for this is one of a couple of things really. Like, there's so many ways this could go. So the first idea I had actually was Kyros has a big weakness against resilient bars, and what you could actually make this skill do is eliminate the resilience bars. You can make it do massive impact damage. By that, however, I don't mean just completely wipe out a boss's resilience bar, at level cap or anything on that sort, but it should do a large amount of damage to it. That's one idea I had, because then you could take down the boss's resilience bar a little quicker, which means you could then just rake spam for burst windows. Alternatively, one of the other ideas I had for this was that you give it piercing. So it ignores a certain amount of the enemy and you get a little more damage value out of it that way instead. And if you didn't want to put those as the ability baseline, you could then have people trait for it. And I would replace the first trait line of Hand of Reckoning, which is slow, which is okay, but not really that useful. And instead, I would just slot one of those two, so you have to trait into it, so it's not given, as a worst case scenario. Okay, let's move on to the Affinity Perks now. There are two that I would actually change for this. So let's start with Discipline, and we'll start with Vicious Protection, okay? To be quite honest with this, right? This should be 5% for 8 seconds, and it stacks up to 3 times. I don't see why you have to use 5 rakes to get 15% damage reduction. You should just use 3. And that would just be so much better for people that actually want to trait into that, and it makes it a little more of a competitive pick. Right now, you've got to burn a lot of rakes just to get that. Doesn't really seem worth it. It's pretty lackluster on that front. The next one I want to talk about is Access Orbs. This should just be standard. Everyone's taking this because 7 rakes is better than 5, right? But if you made it default to 7 rakes instead, you have a better flow. So what you can do with this is allow players to have a better flow with the rakes, and then what you could do in here is actually then put something like a competitive pick like cooldown reduction in here when you pick up an Innervation Orb. That would actually be way better. It would still be very competitive with how you trait your Kyros. Like, it still has to go against like the instinct ones. It would go up against Discipline if you changed like the last trait on that. It would be such a great thing to have, and it doesn't have to be like cooldown reduction by much either. Like, cooldown reductions are very strong, so not too much of it obviously, because Kyros can get a load of Innervation Orbs, but just something like that would really help fill the gap, and just having 7 rakes standard, better flow. If, however, you felt that was too much, what you could do is cut the rakes down from 7 to 6, and that gives you 2 rake full combos right off that. And then that would kind of balance that out a little more. Okay, so let's talk about Kyros and weapons right now. And the weapons I am specifically going to be talking about are the two-handers, or more notably known as Executioner melee, because how they don't have any orb generation is criminal right now. Sword and shields have it, the guns have it, the daggers have it, but not the two hands. And what's even more ironic with that is Kyros' signature weapon, Epitaph, is under a two-hander and doesn't have any orb generation. And to be fair, I feel like that should synergize with him. Like, he should get some orb generation with that if the others do, you know? So what I would do for two-handers is basically swap out one of the mastery lines to fit that in somewhere, or incorporate it into an existing mastery line with some trade-offs there. Now with that change, two-handers have now become a competitive pick, which that opens up to Kyros not just to Epitaph, but to also things like Titan's Bane as well. Things that can actually do some break damage can then be incorporated more into Kyros. Two-handers are great, absolute great at doing some break damage. But right now, not a lot of people are going to be playing with two-handers because it just doesn't synergize well with Kyros, because you cannot generate orbs to generate rakes to be able to rake spam. And that is the play of Kyros right now. That is what you've turned him into, essentially, when you nerfed / fixed him. Like, That's all the guy's got going for him right now, because he just lacks in other areas to combat like bosses in general with resilience bars or mobs with resilience bars. So basically having two-handers generate orbs then opens up two-handers to be a competitive pick for Kyros, because right now it is sword and shields, daggers, and most notably Tempest with the reload that generates orbs as well. Outside of that though, this would then open him up to all the two-handers to be able to pick from and mix and match from there. It's already a good change that should be really considered. Okay, so let's talk about Innervation Orbs, and this is a archetype mechanic, okay? So this is basically right now just for Kyros and Nis. So when you defeat an enemy, there's a chance that it spawns an Innervation Orb, which is great, but I feel like we can play around with this little mechanic more, and we can buff Kyros, but also in the meantime also buff Nis. So the first suggestion, I believe it's by 2tap, and I know Soro-san has said something very similar to this in the Wayfinder Discord, was about Innervation Orbs giving you a cooldown reduction, and this would basically help with the rotation flow just being generally better. My own take on this, if the devs didn't want to go down that route, would be give it a, like when you pick up a Innervation Orb, give it a 10% flat crit chance buff. And the reason why I say that is because if you combine that with some of the other changes I've suggested, you could then, for example, work into things like the Reaver King artifact, which gives you another 10% flat crit rate when the resilience bar is down. So that basically makes your burst window a little more bursty, and then it's back to just having a flat 10% crit rate when the resilience bar is up. This might as well give some build variation where you just don't dump everything into AP, but instead you would actually then put some crit power in to take advantage of that more, and you never know, some people might even invest in some crit chance to try and scale that to a breakpoint. Just a simple couple of tweaks could make him so much better to play. At first I thought it was just me, like I had a gripe against him or something from the old glory days of one-shots, but it turns out after talking to a bunch of other people, like in Retribution, I've spoken to 2tap, for example, from BIS, which is another top tier guild, some of the people in the Wayfinder Discord. Like, there's a lot of people saying this, like it's not just me, so it's not just in my head, like the guy does need some work here. But yeah, don't forget to smash that like button, don't forget to hit subscribe to stay up to date on everything Wayfinder with Retribution Gaming. I'm Terminator T92, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.